Module 5, Lesson 15 homework. Number 1. The width of a picnic table is 3 times its length. If the length is 5/6 yards long, what's the area of the picnic table in square feet? So, very first thing I notice is it's asking for our answer in square feet, but they've given us this in yards. So, before I even have to do anything, I'm going to go ahead and change this 5/6 yards into feet. But we know that there are 3 feet in 1 yard. So what I'm going to do is multiply 5/6 times 3 to see how many feet that would be. So 15/6, 6 goes into 15, 2 times, that's 12, so we get 2 and 3/6, which is equal to 2.5. So this we can replace with 2.5 yards, or 2.5 feet. Now, let me draw this picnic table. So the width of the picnic table is 3 times the length. The length is 5/6 yards, or 2.5 feet. This would be 3 times as long, so 3 times 2.5. So let's figure out what that is. 2.5 I'll make as a mixed into an improper fraction. So I'll make that 3/1. 2.5 would be equal to 5 halves. We get 15 halves, which is equal to 2 goes into 15 7 times with 1 half left over. So that is equal to 7.5. So to find the area, we need to do 2.5 times 7.5. I'll make them improper fractions. So we have 5 halves times 15 halves. 5 times 15 is 25, 75 fourths. And then we need to divide. I'm going to divide to figure out what our answer is. So 4 goes into 7 one time. 4 goes into 35. 4 times 7 is 28. 4 times 8 is 32. So it can go in 8 times. We get 3 left over, nothing to bring down. So we have 18 and 3/4 square feet. So our final answer is this. Number 2, a painting company will paint this wall of a building. The owner gives them the following dimensions. Window A is 6 1/4 feet by 5 3/4 feet. Window B is 3 1/8 feet by 4 feet. Window C is 9.5 feet squared, because it's a square. And door D is 4 feet by 8 feet. So it's nice, they've already given us the area of this one. So that's 9.5 square feet. We need to figure out A, B, and D. And then we'll figure out the total area of the whole wall. And then we'll take out A, B, C, and D so that we can figure out what's left. So this is going to be a lot of work. Bear with me. I'll make each one a different color to try and, so we can try and follow along. So A is going to be purple. Let's start by finding the volume, or not the volume, the area of A. 6 1/4 by 5 3/4. Now I can either do an area model and then find the dimensions that way, or I can make them improper fractions. Since these are kind of larger numbers, I'm going to just make an area model. So we have 6 1/4 and 5 3/4. 6 times 5 is 30. 5/1 times 1/4 would be 5/4, or 1 1/4. Then we have 6/1 times 3/4 is equal to 18/4. And 18/4 would be equal to 4 2/4. Then we have 3/4 times 1/4 equals 3/16. So we need to add that all together. 30 plus 4 2/4 plus 1 1/4 plus 3/16. If we add our whole numbers, we get 30 plus 4 plus 1, that would be 35. We can add the 2/4 and the 1/4. We'll get 3/4. And then plus 3/16. So I'm going to need to find a common denominator. We can use 16. 3/4 is equal to how many 16ths? 12/16. So we get 35, and 12/16 plus 3/16 is 15/16. So there's A. So this is 35 and 15/16 feet squared, or square feet. Now let's do B. So B is 3 1/8 times 4. Now this, I'm just going to multiply. Actually, no, I'll do an area model. It won't be that bad. So we have 3 1/8 times 4. So we have 3 times 4 equals 12. And then 4/1 times 1/8 is equal to 4/8. If we add those up, we get 12 and 4/8, but that's equal to 12 1/2. So B is 12 1/2 square feet. We already have C, so let's do D. D is 4/8. Well, that's nice. That's 32. So 32 feet squared. Now we just need to add everything together. Actually, let's find, have I used green yet? Let's find the area of the entire wall. So 52.5 by 33. and a half by 33. So let's start with 52 times 33. It's equal to 1,716. And then 33 over 1 times 1/2 would be 33 halves. 33 goes into 2, 16. 16 times 2 is 32, so we have 16.5 left over. I'm going to add 16 to this. So we get, not in a third and a half, we get 1,732.5 square feet for that part. Now what we need to do is find what A plus B plus C plus D is and subtract it from the entire wall so we can figure out what is left, what the area of the painted wall would be. So let's take out the windows. So we have, I'll use this color, 35 and 15/16 plus 12.5 plus 32 plus 9.5. Well, what I can do is add 12.5 plus 9.5 because I matched those two up because I know a half and a half is 1. So 12 plus 9 would be, 12 plus 9 would be 21, plus the halves would make it 22. So 22 plus 35 and 15/16 plus 32. So let's add the whole numbers. So 22 plus 32 is 54, plus 35. 4 plus 5 is 9, 5 plus 3 is 8, so we get 89 and 15/16. Okay, our final step is to subtract that from here. So we have 1,732.5 minus 89 and 15 sixteenths. I'm going to make this into 8 sixteenths because 1/2 is equal to 8 sixteenths. Now, the first thing I notice is I can't do 8 sixteenths minus 15 sixteenths. Remember, what we can do is borrow, so I'm going to borrow and borrow 1 whole. Now, I borrowed 1 whole. That's equal to 16 sixteenths. So I get to add 16 sixteenths back into the 8 sixteenths. So 16 plus 8 would get me 24. So this turns into 24 sixteenths, and now I can subtract. So 24 minus 15 is 9 sixteenths. I can't do 1 minus 9, so I'm going to borrow. 11 minus 9 is 2. 2 minus 8 I can't do. I'm going to borrow. 12 minus 8 is 4. 6 and 1. So we get 1,642 and 9 sixteenths square feet. That would be the area of the wall without the windows. And number 3. A decorative wooden piece is made up of 4 rectangles as shown to the right. The smallest rectangle measures 4 1/2 inches by 7 3/4 inches. If 2 1/4 inches are added to each dimension as the rectangle gets larger, what's the total area of the piece? Alright, so we have these 4 shaded rectangles. The smallest one they've given us the dimensions of. So the smallest one is 4 1/2 by 7 3/4. And then, so let's just start by figuring out the area of the smallest one, and then we'll go from there. So we have 4 1/2 by 7 3/4. Do my multiplication in each of my boxes. 7 halves would be equal to 2 goes into 7 3 times and a half left over. It's equal to 3, and then 3/4 times 1/2 is 3/8. So we have 28 plus 3 plus 3 1/2 plus 3/8. If I need to find a common denominator, I know 1/2 and 8, my common denominator would be 8. So I'm going to change 3 1/2 into 3 4/8. And now I can add. So we have 28 plus 3 would be 31. Plus 3 would give us 34. And then we have 4/8 plus 3/8 will give us 7/8. So that one is equal to 34 7/8. Oh, we're talking inches, so inches squared. Okay, now the next largest one, which looks like it'd be this one, it says that 2 1/4 inches are added to each dimension as the rectangle gets larger. So what we need to do is add 4 1/2, add 2 1/4 to that. So if we find a common denominator, we have 4 2/4 plus 2 1/4. That would get us 6 3/4. And then if we add 7 3/4 plus 2 1/4, that would get us 10. So this one is 6 3/4 by 10. So 6 times 10, that's equal to 60. 10 times 3/4 would be 30/4. And 4 can go into 37 times with 2 left over. So we get 7 2/4, 60 plus 7 2/4 is equal to 67 2/4, or we could call it 67 1/2 inches squared. So this one's 67 1/2 Alright, the next one, we're going to need to add 2 1/4 again, but this time to these dimensions. So we're going to do 6 3/4 plus, they're getting 2 1/4 bigger. That would give me 8, and 3/4 plus 1/4 is 1, so we have 9. And then the 10 plus 2 1/4 would get us 12 1/4. So let's figure that out. So 12 times 9 and 9 times 1/4 is equal to 2 1/4. So we get 108 plus 2 1/4, or 110 1/4 inches squared. And then our last one, so we're going to start with these dimensions and add 2 1/4. So we get 11 1/4. So we have 11 1/4 by 14 2/4. I'm going to change 14 2/4 into 1/2 just to make it simpler to multiply. This is equal to 154. 14 over 1 times 1/4 is 14/4. 4 goes into 14 3 times with 2 left over. 11 times 1/2 is 11 halves, not 12 halves, which would be equal to 5 1/2. And then we have 1/2 times 1/4 is 1/8. 11 plus 1/4. I was reading the wrong numbers. Okay, we have 154 plus 3 2/4 plus 5 1/2 plus 1/8. I'm going to add all the whole numbers. I'll start there. So 154 plus 3 would be 157, plus 5 would be 162, plus we have 2/4 plus 1/2 plus 1/8. I'm going to make everything into eighths. 2/4 would be 4/8, plus 4/8 is 1/2, plus 1/8 would be 1 1/8. And then add the 162, so we have 163 1/8 square inches. Alright, our final step, it says what is the total area of the piece? So we need to add all 4 of them together. Alright, let's just start with the whole number. So let's add 110 plus 34 plus 67 plus 163. So we get 374 as our whole number. Now let's add 1/4 plus 7/8 plus 1/2 plus 1/8. So it looks like our common denominator would be 8 1/4, that's 2/8, plus 7/8, plus 1/2 is 4/8, plus 1/8. 2 plus 7 is 9. 9 plus 4 is 13. 13 plus 1 is 14/8, which would be equal to 1 and 6/8, or 3/4. If we just add that to our whole number, so 1 and 3/4 plus 374, we would get 375 and 3/4 square inches.